talk fashion on the Charleston Women podcast. We're talking bold colors, bold style, and an owner whose story pretty much is the American dream. I can't wait to introduce you to the owner of Katyas Kloset.
This is Charleston Women Podcast, where you can meet like-minded, strong, independent, professional, and inspiring local women. This is Charleston Women Podcast.
And now I'd like to welcome Katy Knowlin to the Charleston Women Podcast, the owner of Katyas Kloset. Katy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And I know all of our listeners are not only going to be amazed by your new store that you opened a little less than a year ago, but your story is so amazing. And I'm going to have you share it from, everything that you've overcome in just a little bit. But I do want to start with your business. Congratulations on that. It was a lifelong dream to open Katyas Kloset. For someone who hasn't been there, kind of tell us a little bit more about what it is that you offer.
Sure. So my store is a fusion between LA styles and Latin America. So I'm from El Salvador, and El Salvador, the weather is always tropical, always, there's no such thing as like fall, even though it's fall, it's like 70 degrees, And then LA is such a diverse place where I grew up, where you just see all styles, all colors, anything goes. And I really wanted to bring that fusion together to the Low Country and really just kind of bring my background and share it with my kids. And that's how the story started.
Right. So from what I hear you saying, it's a little, we have our typical Southern style, if you will. It sounds like you're coming in a little edgier, which I think Charleston needs, bringing a little West Coast. Is that right?
It is. That's probably the perfect word, edgier, because I have clients like either come in sometimes and they're like, wow, you don't see this here. And I'm like...
It's not seersuckered and embroidered is what they mean.
Yeah.
So what kind of stuff, like, am I shopping for a date night there? Am I shopping for girls' night, just hanging out? You mentioned your kids, what kind of stuff do we look for there?
Sure. So since it's diverse, you can find either a dress, you can find a sparkly dress, or you can find some very toned down stuff that you can either pair together, right? So you can dress it up or dress it down, and that's what I like, pieces, right? That can be versatile.
Okay. So where do we find you physically in Charleston? Where can we shop? What are your hours?
Thank you. So we are at 1722 Ashley River Road. Shopping hours are Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m.
All right. And we can also go on. I was going to say, go online, say your website, because I was perusing a little bit online, all your cute stuff.
Yes, KatyasKloset.com.
All right.
So with a K. Katya and Closet are with a K.
With a K. So we love supporting local. That's why, the big point of this podcast is to interview women like you and support you and spread the word. So that's, reason A, why we're here, to support your business. But I mentioned in the beginning your story, because you were featured recently in the magazine and you have overcome a lot. You mentioned that you're from El Salvador. Yes. You grew up there for how long until you moved to the States?
I was there for 2 years. So my dad left when I was about a week old to United States. And then my mom left me when I was about 3 months with my grandma. So. Wow.
So what was El Salvador like from what you can remember at that young age? I hear that, you grew up with not a lot of money. There was a story about gangsters and guerrillas were the options there. We joke about it, but it was serious, right?
It's true. It's funny because I have my story of like the war in El Salvador, but then I also have like the LA gang stories as well, which is it's very unique. So when my parents left, it was the time during the Civil War. So things were really bad, and the hospital right across the street where I was born was overtaken. And my mother had to come out with like a white handkerchief just to let people know that she had to go to labor and delivery. Please don't shoot me, So it's just from like the beginning. And because things were so rough, and either you were either recruited to be in the military or you were a gangster, right? My father chose to leave to America, seeking for a better life.
Right.
And my mother followed right after. So they saved for 2 years nonstop saving so they could afford to.
Podcast advertising is the new way to reach your best audience. Podcast advertising gives your business a voice of authority. Be heard. Advertise on one of our podcasts. Visit carolinapodcasts.com or call 843-345-7012.
You're listening to the Charleston Women Podcast.
How much do you remember of those early years? I see that you lived in a tin house. You didn't have a lot of money. You didn't have milk, and they would put sugar in your water. You remember that much?
Yes. So I didn't like, my front teeth were all gone because there was just so much sugar. My grandma trying to substitute that milk, right? Because my mom left me at 3 months, and my grandma didn't have a job as well, and couldn't work. And then also some of the work that the kids did was like we're very plentiful in coffee. So the kids would go pick coffee, the coffee fields, or we had lots of mango trees around us, and we would climb the mango trees and play up there. But I mean, we had nothing, but we were happy, if that makes sense.
Right. I love that you say that. Is that something that you try to pass on, for your kids, for future generations, that you came from nothing, you built something, but you were still happy in the beginning?
Yes. And that's mainly what really I wanted my kids to learn, because it's so easy in today's culture to kind of just say like, sure, I want this, I want that, because I'm guilty of it myself, Right. But sometimes material stuff is not the answer.
Right. When you crossed the San Diego border by car in 1988. So that was your pivotal point. That's when you knew your life was going to change at a young age. When you entered America and started going to American schools, what did you start to do to set a different path for yourself? What made you set your sights high and say, I want to build something different for me?
So it was a little bit of everything. So one, I remember that I used to be singled out because when you come to America and you don't speak English, they put you in ESL classes, they put you in special classes. So you're treated differently. And the first thing was my name. So my name is actually, my mother named me Katya, but in the Civil War, they messed up, right, my name. So it ended up being Katy. So the first thing was they changed my name. They're like, you're not Katy. It doesn't have an H. It's Katy.
Wow. In hindsight, I mean, I'm sure people have called you Katy for years. Would you ever want to go back to your original name, or did it stick at this point?
It stuck. And I tried for years. And after explaining and so much, I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'll just go with it.
Stick with it. I'll stick with it. Kids are awful, aren't they? I mean, the way they could have that power just to rename people. When you came here, so your mom was working, so daycare wasn't an option. So your mom was working as a house cleaner. Is that correct? And you would go with her to these big homes in Beverly Hills?
Yes, it was like a dream, just like when you see in Lifetime or any of those movies.
You're like a movie. You realize it as we unfold your story.
Yeah. It's a movie, but there's been some insane moments. But yes, we used to go clean with her. And I remember some good stuff about it and also some not so good stuff. The good stuff was we used to play with all the toys that the rich kids had, right? Because they were some of them were only child. So I used to play with them. And that was great. But then some of them would just talk down to us you're the help, Yeah. So kind of had a little bit of both, but it also opened up my eyes for my mom, how hard she worked, and the way she struggled with English. And I remember I was like, okay, I got to learn how to write properly, how to speak properly, and just a whole bunch of stuff,
Right. But you did it. And here you are today. And part of your story as you grew up, and was it in high school you start to look into the U.S. military and realize, the options and opportunities with that?
Yes. And actually, it's funny how that happened, because that was not my first route. I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for loans. First, I need to become a citizen, because at the time we were still illegal, or legal, the term alien is the actual proper term. I think.
Okay.
So I thought that was the route I was going to take, because I even did programs at Stanford, all those lower income programs. And one phone call, I dialed the wrong number, ended up dialing a recruiter. I was calling a girlfriend, ended up calling a recruiter. The recruiter told me everything about the Army, and that just changed my perspective of How
does that happen, that you dial the wrong number and you get a recruiter?
Yeah, I know.
Meant to be? I mean, that's wild.
Yeah. So I got a recruiter, ended up talking. Within probably just a few weeks, I was signed up, and it changed my world completely.
It changed your world. So I'll have you, but you were part of the 82nd Airborne, a paratrooper, jumping out of military planes. And am I correct that you're one of the few ladies that did this? There's 1,000 men, and you're one of How many girls?
Yeah. So each class, when you go to Airborne school, maybe there's about 3 and 5 girls. Usually most girls or people that are not in good shape fall out. And I was a lieutenant, lasted, and myself. So,
wow. So did you select to be a paratrooper? I mean, was that your goal to jump out of planes, or did they just say, you know what, I think you would excel at this, that you would be good at this?
There's actually 2 options. You can sign up to be a rigger / paratrooper weight from the beginning. And then when you get further down the training, they actually offer it to you. And at the time, I was like gun ho, best shape of my life. And I'm like, yeah, I think I qualify for that. Sign me up. And I ended up jumping out of airplanes.
So from El Salvador, crossing the border, helping your mom cleaning houses, jumping out of airplanes. After the military, what happens? Because I see that at some point you ended up at MUSC.
I did. So in the whole story, I always wanted to be in healthcare. And the reason was, like, when I was little, I was always sick too. So on top of that, I spent a lot of my time in the hospital. So I naturally grew this like gravitation towards healthcare and nurses and people and so forth. And I thought that's what I was going to be. But I ended up having a child and making decisions that were, I needed to really see financially and long-term where I needed to be. So I ended up doing healthcare infrastructure, which is all the data in healthcare, which, you know what I mean? It's pretty intense now. Right. So that's why I ended up at Duke University and then down at MUSC doing research for stroke and then COVID and all research period.
Okay. So COVID hits. Is that, I'm just trying to follow along because I don't know that I've met everyone who's taken such dramatic life shifts, right? Like so many things, which is what makes you incredible, from where you started to the military, to the medical. At what point though, was it during COVID that you were like, I totally want to shift directions and open a retail store? I mean, was that a new thought, or that was something that had always been like marinating in the back of your head?
It had been in the back of my head for a bit. So I'm naturally like a planner. That's what I do. I manage big infrastructure projects and then I break them out into chunks and make it happen. So whether it's like a 1-year project or a 5-year project, like that's what I've been trained to do in the military. Okay. So when my husband finally retired, we started talking about ideas and things that we could do. And one that was completely different was like the store, right? It had nothing to do with healthcare. It was just its own category. And I told him, I was like, hey, I am giving myself 5 years from when I get to Charleston, and this is what's going to happen. Wow. And and he knew. So we are 3.5 years in.
You're ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
So it's a bold decision to, set your goals, do something entirely different. But also I would add a bold decision that you opened, maybe not at the height of COVID, but you opened spring of 2021. So we're still not out of it now. So was that, add some fear to your decision in this new world we're in?
Yes, it does. In general, period, right? Because one, it's an uncharted territory for me. Right. For shifting from a very militant structure and then going into fashion and a different style. So yes, for sure. But also exciting at the same time, right? Because I'm like, I know I can do this. Other people have done it. It's something different. It's creative, and I'm having fun along the way. And I think that's very, very important, because I've had these jobs, which, by the way, can't knock them, but I found myself stressed a lot. Mm-hmm. And you got to balance that out. Right. Right.
I also want to mention, I like this part of your story, that when you were a child, you remember going into boutiques or even some of those wealthy homes, right? And not being able to afford stuff. So you've really worked hard to make Katyas Kloset affordable for people.
Yes. Yes.
So there's no sticker shock, if you will, when people walk in. It's something that most people can afford.
Yeah, it is very affordable. And I think the shock they get is the prices. I've probably 9 out of 10 people that come in are like, wow, these prices, and that really makes me happy, because I remember, I just couldn't afford it. We had to do layaway, or I got hand-me-downs, and there's nothing wrong with that, but everybody wants to be able to just say like, hey, I got that for myself. I earned it, let me treat myself.
Treat yourself. So, yes. So what is next for you, Katy, now that you've made a major life shift ahead of schedule, I should add, a couple years ahead of your schedule? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see the store? What's next?
Great question. So there's a couple of ventures that my husband and I want to do. One is definitely grow the presence of the store here in Charleston, and then possibly looking into LA. LA has a very special place in my heart,
Yeah. So you're thinking of opening a second one or moving or just still trying to figure it out?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the moving because the cost of LA, it's very
one of the few
expensive.
places more expensive than Charleston, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is
Where our housing prices are right now.
Yes. So considering that, and then even possibly in El Salvador as well. So that way I just never lose that connection.
Wonderful. Do you take your kids back?
I do.
Good.
We went this last, August. We went out there and I took them, and it's very important for them to kind of see like, hey, people live differently,
That's
like
wonderful.
don't just take it for granted. So
that's wonderful. I always like to finish kind of on an inspirational note because we have, women from all over the Low Country, other states, even, listening to this podcast. What would you say to someone who has that distant dream like you had, or, wants to accomplish something or do something that might seem like far-fetched and crazy? What would you tell that person?
So one thing that I've told like team members of mine as they're working and navigating through things is always separate logic and emotion. Because I feel like sometimes we merge them together and that's what holds us back, like fear and other things. So try to separate what's a logical decision and what is an emotional decision and execute.
You are so wise. I think we all need to work on that. No, that's true. It's especially for women, right? Like it's hard to unravel those two sometimes. They're, tightly wound.
Yeah. Well, I felt like that had to happen a lot in the military, when I stood out like sore thumb as a female, as a Latina. And even in data engineering and healthcare stood out a lot. So I had to really be like the non-emotional chica in the room.
Yeah. My last question, I don't always remember to ask this, but I love it when I do. I love talking to business owners like yourself and asking like, what is your morning routine? I'm always fascinated with, I think, how people start their day sometimes leads to success. So do you have anything that you do that you would share? Whether, I don't know, you get up early, you work out, like, is there anything quirky or part of your morning routine that really sets you up for your day?
Well, I would have brought it up here because I was trying to get away from the kids, but I do have a plan. I do. And I've tried not using a planner, not writing stuff. And I felt that I found more success when I actually wrote, this is what I'm going to tackle today and this week and so forth.
Right.
So that's probably the first thing I do.
I'm like you. I think mine's in the other room, but I write a daily to-do list. We have the electronic calendars, but the daily to-do list. Well, Katy, it was so wonderful talking to you. Again, tell us the location, website, and social media for Katyas Kloset so everyone listening can commit it to memory and go give you a follow and stop by the store.
Awesome. So we're located in West Ashley, 1722B Ashley River Road. You can follow us online, Katyas Kloset, or www.katyaskloset.com as well.
All right. And what are you near in West Ashley? So we have a reference.
So right at the corner of Ashley River Road and Sam Rittenberg.
Okay.
So yeah, let's see. What's the closest?
Easy peasy. Yeah. You're in a great spot. Great spot. Well, I cannot wait to stop by. It was so lovely talking to you today. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.
All right. You've been listening to the Charleston Women Podcast. That was Katy Knowlin of Katyas Kloset.
Thanks for spending time with Charleston Women Podcast. Please like us and follow us on whatever platform you're using to access Charleston Women Podcast.